Hello everyone, my name is Glenn Maron and I am a fisheries biologist. I'd like to tell you a story about a wetland ecosystem known as the Pongolopoort Floodplain located in the country of South Africa. The slides you are about to see were taken between 1992 and 1994 when the J.L.B. Smith Institute of Ichthyology conducted a fisheries assessment on the Phongola floodplain system. At the bottom of this figure, you will see a label saying the Pongolopoort Dam or Phongola Dam. The dam regulates the flow in the Phongola River. The other labels on this figure identify specific lakes which are located downstream of the dam, including Mayazela, Inshlanjan, Lawayana, Ingwavuma, Sekunti, Inyumiti, and Bonzi. The river then continues north into the country of Mozambique, where it empties into the Indian Ocean. This is a view looking upstream at the Phongola Dam. This dam is one of the largest dams in South Africa. The dam created an enormous lake behind it. The water is used primarily for large-scale agricultural irrigation in the region. Agriculture is an important activity in the region and provides food and jobs and contributes to the economy of South Africa. Enormous fields of crops dominate the surrounding landscape. In this picture, water is being released from the dam in February 1994. The water fills the downstream river and lakes, which is vital to the people living on the floodplain. In the mid-1990s, approximately 100,000 people lived along the floodplain and rely on the resources of the area to provide them with food and other subsistence resources. The objective of our research program was to monitor the response of the fish populations to controlled water releases from the dam and identify what seasons of the year water releases would maximize downstream fish production. Here is a view of the Phongola River downstream from the dam. This is a view of one of the 98 lakes located adjacent to the river that have channels connecting the river to the lakes. This is Lake Tet. This is Lake Inyumiti in the Ndumu Game Reserve. The fishery study was centered on local community utilization of the fisheries resource. What you are about to see in the following slides is an indigenous fishing technique practiced by people living on the floodplain called Fanya fishing. Fanya fishing refers to the type of basket shown here in the front of the slide that is used to catch fish. We observed numerous Fanya drives, which entail several hundred people fishing at one time. The people form a line across a lake and all move in the same direction, herding and trapping fish as they move towards the other end of the lake. The Fanya baskets are thrust to the bottom of the lake in an attempt to trap fish. There is a hole in the top of the basket where people put their hand in to remove the trapped fish. Men, women, and children all get involved with Fanya fishing. In South Africa, Fanya fishing is only practiced on the Phongola floodplain. Fish are a primary staple in the diet of the local people. Our research indicated that fish comprised more than 3/4 of the protein consumption of the people. The people living along the floodplain have been harvesting the fisheries resource for thousands of years. During every Fanya drive I witnessed, the local people were very friendly to us and always in great spirits. I was usually in the middle of these Fanya drives, trying my own hand at catching fish. All heck breaks out when the fish become concentrated at the other end of the lake. In addition to using Fanya baskets, women and girls will use cloth netting to scoop up fish as well. Fanya fishing not only benefits the people by supplying fish, but it is also a very social event that brings people from the surrounding villages together. The people always let us assess their catch. Approximately 2 kilograms of fish per person was collected by over 500 people during this Fanya drive. This lake was beginning to dry up and would require water releases from the dam to fill it up and provide habitat for fish and food for people. People use various other fishing techniques. These women are using bamboo fishing poles. This fisherman is proudly displaying his catch. Women were often seen using cloth netting to capture fish. Netting of all sizes and shapes were used to collect fish. Fish will make a fine meal. This is a typical fishing boat made of local material and used on the Phongola. The Phongola floodplain is also cattle country. The number of cattle determine a family's wealth. Much bartering is done with cattle, such as the dowry set for a bride. This is an Sangoma, a person of magical powers and a traditional doctor. The research team surveyed the entire Phongola system from the lake created behind the dam downstream along the floodplain. The research team surveyed every possible habitat type using a variety of fishing techniques, including gill nets, seine nets, and electrofishing, all of which will be explained below. There were up to 10 people working as a team to accomplish this comprehensive assessment of the fish populations. We were assisted by several rangers from the Natal Provincial Administration and all from the great Zulu nation. Garrett Sweetman from the J.L.B. Smith Institute of Ichthyology is on the right of the photo. This is Louis Locke, also from the Natal Provincial Administrator, electrofishing within the Phongola Dam with Garrett Sweetman assisting. Fisheries team sampling below the dam in the Phongola River. This photo shows the seine netting method used, which took several people to properly set. In this picture is Louis Look pulling the net into the lake. Next to him is Ilias, Reinhard Holzhausen, Alex Wood, and myself in the foreground. There is a weight line which keeps the net on the bottom and a float line which keeps the net from sinking. The net is set in a semicircle and then pulled in toward shore. As the net tightens, you can see the fish literally jumping over the net. This is Alec Wood holding up a carp. Carp were not found on the floodplain prior to 1984. In 1984, Cyclone Des Moines flooded the entire Phongola system and allowed carp, which were known from further upriver, to colonize the downstream floodplain. The people call this fish the Josini fish. Josini is the town where the Phongola Dam is located, and the people believe the fish came with the dam. Here is Greg Nell and myself seine netting a rapid area where small catfish with sucker-like mouths cling to the rocks and live in these types of habitats. This is seine netting in the shallow floodplain marshes where many juvenile fish use this type of habitat as a nursery ground before migrating out into the river and lakes. In this photo, from the left, is Sarah Weldrick, myself, Ilias, Louis Look, and Alec Wood behind me. This is Greg Nell and myself seine netting a backwater pond in the Nadumu Game Reserve. This pond typically dries up each year, and it is one of the only areas on the Phongola system where a special fish species called Notobranchius thrives. There is an interesting story about this fish. When this pond begins to dry, this species of fish buries their eggs in the mud. The buried eggs remain dormant throughout the dry season and hatch the following year when the rains return and the pond fills up again. The cycle then repeats itself. Here, Louis Luke and myself are getting ready to set gill nets in Lake Inyamiti in the Nadumu Game Reserve. Fish sampling in the Nadumu Game Reserve lakes was done with a watchful eye for both hippos and crocodiles, which thrive in the reserve. This is electrofishing in the Phongola River at Makani's Drift, where several large eels were collected. This is the Usutu River on the South African border with the country Mozambique. Here we were specifically looking for small catfish of the genus Chiloglanus, or as we called them, Chiles. We also hunted for the rare pipefish that inhabits the reeds and grasses along the fringes of the river. This was a particularly large effort which entailed many, many people. During the course of the fisheries research, thousands of fish were analyzed to determine when spawning occurred and what the various species were feeding on. Here is a large collection of tigerfish and tilapia caught in Lake Inyamiti in the Nadumu Game Reserve. Myself holding up a tilapia, which is a fish prized for its delicate flesh. The lakes in the Nadumu Game Reserve contain large populations of fish that repopulate the upstream floodplain during periods of water releases from the Phongola Dam. These water releases, however, must occur at the right time of the year to stimulate fish migrations. This is a picture of a red breast tilapia, another fine food fish. This is a very interesting species, which is extremely rare on the Phongola floodplain. This species, called megalops, typically inhabits saltwater environments near the ocean, but can swim upstream in large river systems such as the Phongola, where it is able to adapt to the freshwater conditions. Another ocean dweller, the Zambezi shark, was also observed in the Nadumu Game Reserve. This is a carp, which, as I mentioned, found its way into the Phongola system after Cyclone Demoina in 1984. This species has spread throughout the Phongola. Fish weren't the only creatures caught in the net. Here is a small crocodile which was caught with a sample of fish. One of the objectives of the research was to determine during what seasons of the year water releases from the Phongola Dam would maximize fish production on the floodplain. These are ripe eggs of sharp-toothed catfish. We determined that water releases in the spring to stimulate migrations of fish, and then a second water release during summer would result in the greatest percentage of fish spawning and ultimately providing an important food source for people. Water releases from the dam during the cooler winter months, when fish are not reproductively active, resulted in no significant increase in fish production. We interviewed several hundred people living on the floodplain to gather their opinions regarding water releases from the dam and fish production. People's answers were tabulated and several patterns emerged. It was clear that people wanted water releases from the dam to maintain the river and lakes and provide more fish on the floodplain. We also held numerous village meetings on the floodplain between 1992 and 1994, where the objectives of the fisheries program were discussed with the local people. A poster entitled "Fishing on the Phongola" was also produced and distributed throughout the region. In an effort to provide additional information on the importance of fish and timely water releases from the dam for the benefit of the people. Getting around the Phongola required the use of four-wheel drive vehicles to navigate the sandy road conditions. This was a typical camp scene. From left is myself, Sarah Weldrick, Reynard Holzhausen, and Louis Look. The data collected on the various species of fish and where they were caught was entered into a computer program which classified two main communities of fish found on the floodplain. There is a strong riverine component of habitat specialists that prefer the faster flowing waters of the main river channel. Some of these species include Chiloglanus, Labiocylindricus, Microlestes acutidens, Microphius fluviatalis, and Barbus annectens. There is also a lacustrine or lake community of fish that prefer the slower flowing water of the lakes on the floodplain. Some of these species include Brycinus imberi, Tilapia spalmani, Glossogobius species, P. philander, and Clarius garippinus. It was clear to the fisheries team that water releases from the dam in the spring and summer led to massive migrations of fish to suitable spawning grounds, ultimately resulting in a greater biomass of fish for people to catch. We also developed a geographic information system, or GIS, for the Phongola system, which simulated the area of the floodplain downstream from the dam that would be inundated from water releases of different volumes from the dam. In other words, not only was the timing of water releases during spring and summer important, but also the water releases needed to be of sufficient volume to enable the water to reach the northernmost areas of the system and connect the lakes in the Nadumu Game Reserve with the main river channel. The lakes in the Nadumu Game Reserve harbor large populations of fish that recolonize the other lakes on the floodplain. The fisheries team also experimented with developing fish farms as another way to provide more fish for people. There are several species of fish that are well suited for fish farming, especially tilapia and catfish, which are preferred food fishes. This is a typical man-made pond that was stocked with baby tilapia, which grew to adults in 6 months. Here is Sarah Weldrick and myself on the steps of the J.L.B. Smith Institute of Ichthyology in January 1995, when the fisheries report on the Phongola floodplain was completed and submitted to South African government authorities. Sarah went on to complete her master's thesis in fishery science at Rhodes University based on the data collected. The research information was also published widely, and I had the opportunity of presenting the research findings to many colleagues at the American Society of Ichthyologists and Herpetologists meeting held in 1995. The Phongola Dam, river, lakes, and floodplain are important assets for the people living in the area. The water demands on the floodplain include agriculture, domestic consumption, livestock watering, and environmental needs. Integrating science and traditional fishing and identifying appropriate water releases from the dam to maximize fishery production on the floodplain were primary objectives of our research. It is important that water releases from the dam be timed at the right time of year and be of sufficient volume to inundate the floodplain and allow fish to spawn, and maintain the subsistence fishing practices which occur downstream. There is also a video available from the Inland Ecosystems webpage on the Phongola system, which provides more detail on the fisheries research work. There is also an enormous amount of information on the internet for anyone wanting to learn more about this fascinating ecosystem and the people who live there.